You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
When is the last time you made s'mores? Crunchy, gooey, and with everyone's favorite, Hershey's milk chocolate. Whether you're making new memories with your friends beside a campfire, inviting neighbors over for a casual cookout, or cooking s'mores in the oven with your family on a rainy day, enjoy some more of each other with Hershey's S'mores. Find Hershey's milk chocolate bars at your favorite retailer. Time to s'more some more.
Welcome to Queen's Podcast, where Katie and Nathan are about to spill all the juicy details on yet another incredible queen with a little bit of spicy language, or maybe even a lot of spicy language. Alicia
and Stacy, here from Trashy Royals, the podcast all about naughty nobles and our betters behaving badly. We wanted to let you know about the very real possibility of strong language in the following episode. Proceed as you wish.
Hi, this is Katie.
And this is Nathan.
And you're listening to Queen's Podcast, the show about women in history.
A go time.
Katie, long time no see, aka last week.
Yeah, it's Sunday. I saw you on Friday. But you know what? You know who we haven't seen in a couple of months? The main feed with a new episode.
We're back, bitches.
We are back, motherfuckers, to tell you about some bitches in history.
That was our new opening monologue there.
Bitches in history. Bitches in history. Yep.
Oh my god.
Sabrina Carpenter, watch out. New hit song coming your way.
Have you missed us? I think you have. I think you have.
Nathan, we've been teasing it on the main feed with the Wars of the Roses week, all this week. Mm-hmm. And in our Facebook discussion group, people are taking a vote on who they think it's going to be. So if somebody press play without reading the title of this episode, Nathan, who are we talking about today?
In case you didn't read, we are talking about Margaret of Anjou.
Yes.
And Margaret of Anjou is like a central character in the War of the Roses.
She was Queen of England, married to Henry VI, and she is sometimes referred to as the she-wolf of France.
And Katie, this drink that I hath made,
doth tell us.
So it is rosé spritzer, which I took a shot of vodka, half a shot of elderberry liqueur, and then put in some Italian soda that was blood orange flavored.
Ooh.
And mixed it all up, and so we have a blood orange spritzer, ladies and gentlemen. I did put blood orange bitters in it too, so it is gorgeous. It is gonna get bloody.
Oh yeah, this story does get bloody. Not super bloody in this episode, but
not now.
The blood is coming.
A bloody rose is what I was going for.
Rose. I love it. So, before we get started, it has been a minute since we've done a Patreon shout out. Patreon supporters. Thank you so much to our Patreon supporters over the summer who have joined. Jennifer, Sydney, Beth, Yami, Alex, Stephanie, Lindsay, and Leah.
Also, shout out to Hope, Elizabeth, Hannah, Carla, Taylor, Skylar, and Julie.
Yes.
Thanks to everybody in general.
Yeah. Whether you're a Patreon supporter or not, thank you for joining us. If this is your first Queen's Podcast episode, welcome. If this is like your 110th, welcome back. We love each and every one of you to pieces.
And right off the bat, this is one of those that this should be your 111th episode. If you know a little bit about the War of the Roses, that's gonna help you here, because this is definitely something where you need to know some of the characters that came beforehand, like Yolanda of Aragon or Margaret Beaufort. Those are two really great episodes that you might want to go catch up on. But don't switch us off yet.
No.
We just think you'll just enjoy it as is, but you might want to listen to some of those between part 1 and part 2 so that you can kind of get the whole story.
Yes. In this episode, we're going to introduce Margaret, but in the week between this episode and the next one in her story, I'll go ahead and link in the show notes out to listen to some of our other Wars of the Roses episodes. I think it just might help you set the scene a little bit. That being said, let's get into the life of Maggie O.A. M.O.A.
M.O.A. Moa. Gimme Moa. Gimme Moa. I don't know.
Gimme.
Margaret was born March 23rd of 1430 in modern-day France. So our girl is a ram. She's an Aries, and to be honest, kind of see it.
As somebody with a lot of Aries in my chart, sometimes I act before thinking. Margaret's parents had 10 children together, and Margaret was the 5th child. Random little tangent I went down. So her dad was only 21 when Margaret was born, and she is his 5th child.
So he's been having babies since
he was like 15. He got married because Margaret's mom was a little bit older. So they got married when he was like 15 and she was like 19 or something. Anyway, that was just a little, I went on a lot of tangents. Get ready. So, so her upbringing is kind of wild. I want to kind of set the scene in how she was raised.
Her dad was Margaret of Anjou, and he's the son of Queen's podcast alumni, Yolanda of Aragon.
Yes.
And if you've never listened to that episode, this is all you need to know about Yolanda. She was a force to be reckoned with, bitch.
For real.
Yeah. She went against the monarchy in France and actually funded a little-known warrior called Joan of Arc. Maybe you've heard of her.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that that's a name that our listeners will be familiar with. Little known indie warrior, Joan of Arc.
So Yolanda is this hard-ass lady who honestly wants to change the course of European history forever.
So Margaret's mom and dad are kind of always away at war. She is primarily raised by Yolanda of Aragon, her paternal grandmother, which, oh my God, talk about in a time and place in history where women aren't always having a seat at the table. Talk about the head of the fucking table. Talk about who bought the table.
But Margaret's dad, Rene, was the Duke of Anjou and King of Naples. And her mom, Isabella, was the Duchess of Lorraine in her own right. When Maggie's dad was taken hostage, Mama Isabella led an army to rescue him.
How fucking cool.
What punk rock energy. So
seriously, though.
Yeah, she served as a regent in Naples for over a year while Dad was off fighting, being captured, and taken hostage.
She just has all of these strong female role models. She sees women can be brave, women can lead the discussion, women can serve in position of power. So, yes, snap, snap, snap.
I'm snapping. Since her family did view the girls as people who could hold power one day, they got good educations. So, on top of being that big ram energy, big Aries energy, she's got 2 very strong female role models in her life. Top-notch education. Girl is made for leadership.
Y'all, big clit energy, morning, noon, and night.
Wake up, big clit. Go to sleep, big clit.
Yeah.
Eat, big clit. Like, it's just...
Besides her dad being, like, taken hostage and all this stuff, like, nothing really goes on in her childhood. So we are going to fast forward to when she's 14, which, yes, to us, we'd be like, that's still childhood. But in the 1400s, that is on the verge of adulthood. So now she is 14.
We got to talk about the 100 Years' War, which the 100 Years' War...
116 years, but whatever.
Long story short, yeah, it was 116 years, but who's counting? All of us. All of us are counting,
all
actually.
of us.
Yeah, but England and France. England and France. Like, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the Miss Universe, like, France! Miss France! So, 100 Years' War, 116, who's counting? Yes. France and England fighting over and over and over, because England thought that they should just rule part of France, and France was like, hey, you can fuck the fuck off.
You can fuck all the way off. So in 1444, this war has been going on for 107 years. And both England and France are kind of over it. And the King of England is this really young guy named Henry VI. He's unmarried, so he calls up the King of France and he's like, hey, Charles VII, can we, end this? I'm done. I want peace. I know I'm broke. I know you're broke. Why don't I marry one of your daughters? And we'll make an alliance and call it a truce.
Yeah, the King of France in general liked this idea, but he wasn't really dying to marry his daughters off to the enemy.
Yeah.
However, the King of France was married to Margaret's paternal aunt. So the king is like, my brother-in-law has some daughters. They might work.
Yeah.
However, my brother-in-law is broke as a joke from fighting in all these wars. So that dowry, you might not be getting it.
Ain't happening, Captain.
At this point, England is so desperate to end the wars because they're spending so much money on that anyway. They're like, hey, dowry or not, we'll take it.
For anybody that might be a new listener, what is a dowry? For a woman, it's kind of like a safety net. Okay, you're going to marry my daughter, and so I'm also going to send her over with $1 million. That closes the agreement, but also, if you die... Okay, well, then she's got that $1 million to live off of, or whatever.
Yeah, and that's her $1 million, too.
Yeah.
Like, she has ownership to that.
Yeah, and back in the day, that was a big part of these marriage agreements, is the dowry. So the fact that Henry is foregoing the dowry shows how fucking desperate he is.
He was thirsty to end this war.
He was so thirsty to end this war. Henry is like, awesome. I'm going to send over some dudes to go meet up with your brother-in-law, scope out the situation, have a look at his daughter. At age 14, I thought this was interesting. Margaret goes with her dad to meet the English envoys because they want to make sure that she's queen material. So they all write back to Henry being like, she is smart, she is quick-witted, she has dark features, which back then was a red flag because history is gross.
God.
But Nathan, she's hot.
I mean, okay, everyone at court at this point said that she's hot, which she's a 14-year-old Maggie.
She's 14?
She's 14. Nobody's going into the burn book and saying Maggie is a fugly slut.
No.
Nobody's saying that about the Duke's daughter, the king's niece.
Right. Right.
But they also didn't over-exaggerate.
I mean, he was going to see her.
Yeah, he would have seen her eventually.
I think we can assume that she was conventionally attractive, even if she was quote-unquote dark. But. Yeah. The report sent back to Henry said that she was womanly already at age 14. I hate it here. I hated reading that as much as I hated saying it out loud. But I liked this, and this is just Yolande of Aragon shining through. He was told that her courage was, quote-unquote, above the nature of her sex, which means that she is just
Word.
That means even at 14, she's speaking her mind. She is poised, but she is also not afraid to say, like, what she feels like she needs to say.
Yeah.
And they wrote that she had great, quote, great wit, great diligence, and carefulness.
And I think guys weren't used to seeing something like this. A girl being an active participant in her own negotiations. Like, wait a second. A smart, educated woman.
We've talked about a lot of women on this show that their parents started negotiating their marriages when they were young. There aren't a whole lot of them that when they were as young as 14 were active participants in the negotiation. Do you know what I mean?
No, you're exactly right. Like, none of them were privy to the talk.
Well, look at you breaking out Bridgerton words.
Cheers to my blood-owned spritzer.
No facts, just vibes.
In case you missed it.
The vibe I'm getting is that her parents, they know how smart their daughter is. I just get the vibe that it was like, oh, if we don't include her in on this anyway, she's gonna make herself known anyway, so we may as well bring her to the top. I just think it's really cool that from a young age, her parents gave her the agency. And so that's my no facts, just vibes guess, is that they were like, well, she's a ram. She's gonna butt her head in if we leave her out, so let's bring her anyway, because she's only gonna be a credit to their family because she's so smart anyway. What do you think?
Agreed. 100% agreed. Henry's dudes sent back a glowing recommendation about Margaret. Back to England. I'll stop doing that. And now it's time for Margaret of Anjou to start packing up and getting ready for her trip because she's about to be the Queen of England, y'all.
Oh, heading to England.
Going to the palace, gonna get my fucking crown.
Oh, yeah. Oui. So we already talked about you're not getting a dowry. You're just getting peace out of this. Also, France was not going to pay for her trip to London, which was going to be super fucking expensive on its own. Because she's not traveling just like some monk, you know?
Yeah, like with an overhead carry-on.
She is traveling in style. So her carriages, or pimp my carriage, you know? Her gowns are all new.
Pimp my gown.
It's paying for her to travel with the bougiest ladies in waiting. Those bitches ain't cheap either. Her security, they're not just going to be some dudes off the street. They are going to be the bravest, biggest, strongest knights. Can you imagine how expensive this is? They're also, along the way, she's expected anytime she goes to a religious shrine to make a big donation to show her charity. So this is not fucking cheap just to get her from Anjou to London.
Yeah, but Henry's like, hey, in the long run, if this ends the war, and this war is costing so much money, so England agreed to just pay, but King Henry didn't make that public knowledge, which in the future is gonna look real bad on
King
Maggie.
Henry VI makes very many mistakes in his life.
Looking back in history, not a good leader.
And so him just not disclosing this to the people that need to know where money is going to, he just didn't even think it would look bad on her. You know, hindsight is 20/20, but come on, dude.
Yeah. So her journey and her coronation, which obviously England paid for completely. In modern day terms, is about $9 million. It's not her fault though. It's not her fault.
Complete side note. Like, I mean, Maggie didn't grow up in rags or whatever, but she's probably also never had this much pomp and circumstance paid to her. She's probably feeling a little bit like, like, what do you...
I've come to town.
Yes, I have arrived. You are welcome. So Maggie starts her long journey to England to become Queen of England. So it starts with a marriage by proxy with a dude named William de la Pole, who is the Duke of Suffolk, standing in for Henry. So, like, highlight that name. We're going to circle back. But Nathan, what is marriage by proxy? What does that mean?
By proxy just means by way of another.
Yes.
To be able to have a marriage without having to actually have to have your partner there.
Yeah.
Essentially. So it's a mock wedding. But it's not a mock wedding, it's a real wedding.
It's legally binding. Just the person you're marrying isn't
actually
there.
Yeah.
So they have this by proxy wedding. The reason they do this is while she's traveling, she is the Queen of England, basically. And so when she enters England, she's not entering England as like a random princess. She's entering as the queen, as the king's wife. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So
Katie, you rabbit hole?
Years ago, my mother-in-law got me this book, The Red Roses by Amy License. And it's just about the women from the Lancaster side of the Wars of the Roses. And so this was a story from this book that I was just like, what? While Margaret is traveling through and making her way to England, she stays in this city called Rouen. And at the time, the Duke of York is like the manager of Rouen, and he's living in the castle there. So she stays with the Duke of York and his wife. It is completely possible, we don't know for sure, but it's completely possible that the Duke of York's children would have been there. His son, Edward, would have been only 2 years old. Does that name sound familiar to you? Edward, on the York side of the Wars of the Roses? Duke of York's son, Edward, is the future Edward IV.
Edward of York.
So it's very possible that the 2-year-old future king is there. Now, rewind back to our Jacquetta of Luxembourg episode. Do you remember how because Jacquetta of Luxembourg was like a distant cousin of Margaret, that they sent her to escort Margaret back to England? Mm-hmm. So Jacquetta of Luxembourg and her husband were also there for Easter. And it's very possible as well that they brought their eldest daughter with them. So it is, we don't know for sure, but it is possible that Margaret of Anjou was in this castle with the future king and queen that, spoiler alert, would rival her and her husband one day, but they were children. How wild is that? Do you find that as wild as I do?
It's one of those moments that if you could be a fly on the wall in history.
Yes. But they're going to be her
just
big rivals one day, but they're 2 years old, you know?
And they have no idea this is going to happen, and you're just like, oh my god, OMG.
Anyway, so that was my rabbit hole.
Let's
continue with the story. Let's dig ourselves out and get back to Maggie's journey to London.
So she hangs out there with the York family for a few weeks, and they host party and pageants and have all kinds of celebrations, all in the name of their new queen and the peace this marriage brought to England, which it did. Because part of their marriage agreement was a 2-year truce between England and France. And the hope is that in those 2 years, they can settle all their differences.
You know, just clean up 100 years in 2 years. Yeah, sure. But now it's time for her to actually head over to England. And y'all, this journey was a nightmare. It stormed so bad that the ship lost both of its masts. So I had to Google, what is a mast? It is the piece of wood that holds a sail. And they didn't have motors on these boats back then. How do you even navigate without the mast then?
With a couple prayers.
With some prayers. Some
Thoughts and prayers.
Yes. Scary fucking shit. This journey should have taken 2 days, and it took like 9.
Ugh.
I know.
Yeah, during this trip, that guy we mentioned earlier, William de la Pole, the Duke of Suffolk, was responsible for keeping Maggie safe. Mm-hmm. And his wife, Alice Chaucer, aka Duchess of Suffolk, was her first maid of honor in charge.
Also granddaughter of Henry Chaucer? Is that his name? What's his first name?
Joffrey
Chaucer. Granddaughter of Joffrey Chaucer.
And during this trip, Margaret was sick. And
So
not like the good kind of sick. The bad kind of sick. Yeah,
Like
so
the barf
sick.
kind of sick.
And the Duke and Duchess of Suffolk, they did everything they could to take care of her. And it seems that as a result, she created this bond with them. And they were the first people from like English court that she was like, oh, I can trust them.
These are my friends.
These are my friends. These are people that, you know, if I get drunk at a bar, they'll be like, hey, come home, sweetie. Don't make bad decisions.
They're not going to
Like
let
that.
you do anything dumb. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the Duke of Suffolk was old enough to be your dad, so she probably viewed him like that, a father figure.
Yeah, I think so. So when their ship finally landed in England on April 9th, 1445, Margaret was too sick to even walk, which just makes me think for that 9 days, she must have just been barfing 100% of the time. And she was just like too weak. And so Suffolk literally carried her off the ship. So I think that's important to remember when we're talking about the bond that these two have formed and maybe that daughter-father relationship. One silver lining here, I will say, is that maybe if she hadn't been sick, she'd be like really anxious about meeting her husband. She didn't have time to fucking think about that when
She's too fucked up.
coming out both ends situation. With that on your minds, let's take a quick break. I'm going to go top off my drink, and we have some very important words from our sponsors for you guys to hear.
Do you find it hard to sleep at night? Then the Calm Cove podcast can help you sleep deeply all night long. Calm Cove has deeply relaxing meditation music and ambient sounds like ocean waves and crackling fires. All of our episodes are designed to help you relax and to fall asleep fast. Calm Cove is brought to you by the team behind Sleep Cove, the sleep podcast that consists of spoken word hypnosis, meditation, and stories. So if you want to listen to a beautiful soundscape tonight, search for Calm Cove on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and see how we're helping millions of people relax and go to sleep every night.
Hello everyone, Stakuyi here,
And I'm Gabby.
and we are the hosts of History of Everything, a podcast which you can probably guess by the name is, well, it's about everything. Do you want to know why people thought potatoes were evil and would give you syphilis? Are you curious about all the stories of the terrible and stupid ways that people have kicked the bucket over the years? Do you want to hear tales about all of the different badasses of history and the lives that they had brought to life? Well, if so, then look no further. History of Everything is just the right podcast for you. It's available on Spotify, Pandora, and anywhere else that you get your podcast from. Join us for some fun and just see how weird and wacky history can be.
I really hope you like that message from our sponsors.
Oh my God, it was such an interesting message from our sponsors.
And
Anyway.
now we're going to talk about Maggie. So she's been going through it on her journey from France to England. She takes a couple of days to recover.
Yeah.
And then she starts feeling good enough to make her way into London. But this also would be a really long journey for her. It would take her over a month to get to London because at every single stop, it was parties on parties on parties on parties on parties on parties on
They were
parties.
throwing pageants. They were throwing plays. They were doing feasts. Like,
Lil Jon was at every single one going, yeah, at every...
to the window, to the wall. At
Georgia,
every
yeah.
okay. At every single stop. Can you imagine? Her social battery was ever at a deficit. She didn't show it, which I think that shows something interesting about her personality.
100%.
But also something that I think is really important for us to keep in mind in all of this. Every single stop, every single pageant people were doing, every single play people were doing for her, the reoccurring theme was peace. You are bringing peace to this nation. For over 100 years, every single family, keep that in mind, every single fucking family in this entire country has lost a husband, a brother, a son, a grandson, or whatever to this war. Mm-hmm. So they are just like, you are the end of war. So also she couldn't exactly be like, I need my me time, when people are like treating her like the olive branch that they've been so desperately wanting for 107 fucking years.
Yeah, it was a long time, y'all. First stop, Southampton. After she arrived, she received this welcome from a squire.
Ooh.
And he knelt before her and said, I have a letter for you from the king.
Oh, yay, a letter from my husband. Yay, 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 yay.
She's so excited to read this letter that she didn't even acknowledge the squire that knelt, which meant, like, due to court protocol, he had to stay kneeling until she acknowledged him and, like, tells him to stop kneeling, which sounds super uncomfortable if you are said squire.
And she's just reading the letter, and this squire is on his knees the entire time, just looking at her, being like, So, who was this squire? Why are we talking about this guy? Well, it was actually the King of England, King Henry VI, disguised as a squire. I don't know what his plan of action was here. I think he was just thinking like courtly love, but once it actually came to fruition, he was like, oh shit, I did not think this through.
That is 100% what happened. Like, he was like, oh, this is going to be this beautiful love
romantic
moment. And then she's like, I'm reading the... And he's sitting there kneeling, looking at her, being like, don't you know who I am?
Well, of course she would.
Like,
I mean,
she wouldn't know who he is.
They didn't have an Instagram. She hasn't been able to go and look through his pics. She didn't know. I'm sure if somebody had been like, hey, this is something he might pull, she would have played along, but she didn't know this was something he might do. I think after 10 minutes on his knees, he was probably like, like Joe Bluth, like, I have made a huge mistake.
Yeah. So let's get to know Henry VI really quick, shall we?
Let's do it.
Henry VI had been king since he was 1 year old. And Katie, what do we say about babies and jobs?
Babies don't need jobs. Call me crazy. King seems like a pretty high pressure job. It seems like something that you need a little bit of experience for. And when you're one, you have no experience. None. It is above your pay grade when you are 1 year old.
It's so true. But Henry VI, his dad was Henry V. Henry V, for real, he was famous for being a warrior and the badass king. Big dick energy.
I will Hulk out. Yes. Yes.
This is the most masculine you will ever see Queen's podcast.
So she's expecting a king that maybe inherited those traits, which what I have to say to that is womp womp.
He did not.
Yeah. So anyway, so his dad was Henry V, important warrior. Nathan, who was his mom?
His mom was the daughter of the French King Charles VI of France, a.k.a. Charles Le Mad.
Le Mad?
That was the man.
Did you just throw in just one French word?
Le Guilty.
We did 3 parts on Isabeau of Bavaria, which is Charles the Mad's wife. What should we know about Henry VI's grandfather then? Like, the Mad isn't how we describe him now, but he was not mentally stable, was he?
No.
No. Say it in French.
No.
No. So anyway, because Henry was a baby when he became king, a regency council was put in place.
Yeah, there's like 18 guys sitting around at a table shooting the shit,
That's
trying to figure
way
things
too many
out
people.
for the country. Yeah, narrow this down. Dwindle this pool. But when he was old enough to reign on his own, which was like 16.
Again,
if
too
you can
young.
drive a car, you can drive a country. Henry was happy to let his council just kind of keep doing their own thing. Hey, y'all good? We good? We vibing?
We've talked about a lot of kings, had to have regency councils until they're old enough, and they were just chomping at the bit to like take over. Henry VI was just sort of like, it seems like y'all got this. I would like to just do anything else. Like, he was not actually interested in running the government at all, which, again, bad sign. Maybe, it's almost like maybe you shouldn't inherit power.
Yeah, right. The 8-ball is saying no.
The 8-ball is saying outlook not good. Yeah, so he's happy to let the Regency Council just like keep running shit well past his majority. And this is bad news because the council is starting to form rivalries within itself. Like there's starting to be a schism where they're like fighting. And there's lots and lots of fighting. If he had good leadership skills, he would have recognized that. And as soon as he was old enough, or even before he was old enough, tried to start like micromanaging. But yeah, he just wasn't interested in running the government. And he was a sweet guy, but he preferred to keep to himself. And I really think, born into any other family, I think he would have been an amazing, like, college professor. I think he would have been a great priest, not a king.
So he's not into this at all.
Which is a problem.
But by the time Margaret of Anjou arrives in England, Henry has been ruling in his majority for about 7 years. But like we said, he still relied heavily on his council for running. Let's just give you the TLDR. Let's just map out the powerful dudes in England that you need to know for this story.
Like Nathan was saying, there was a whole lot more guys, but we're going to talk about like 4 of them so you understand from Margaret's point of view, the important power players. So first, there is the king's uncle Humphrey, the Duke of Gloucester, and he is probably calling the shots. Again, even though Henry hasn't named an heir, everyone just assumes until Henry has kids, the Duke of Gloucester is technically the king's heir as well.
An important thing to note is that the Duke of Gloucester actually wasn't into the idea of peace with France. He thought that we should keep it on with that 100 Years' War, because we should own France. At the beginning of the marriage negotiations, he was against the match with Margaret. Like, it had nothing to do with Margaret herself, but still.
Yeah. And so the next guy we're going to mention is Richard, Duke of York. And he's like a second cousin once removed of Henry's. And him and his cousin, the Duke of Gloucester, are BFFs. So they both don't want peace with France. So they are both against the marriage with Maggie.
All right, so we're talking the Duke of York and the Duke of Gloucester
Are on the shit list.
So
They're on the shit
let's
list.
look at the not shit list. The people that are not against the marriage.
Yes.
So there's the Duke of Suffolk. It's the father figure that she got along with in court. Like, that's her whole person. And his wife, Alice, is Margaret's chief lady in waiting. And he literally carried her when she was too weak to walk.
Not figuratively. Literally.
Like, knight in shining armor. Well, dad figure. He's got her from day one. He's her friend.
From day one, she was like, this is my ally. And then, so that guy's best friend at court is a guy named Edmund Beaufort, and he is the Duke of Somerset. Edmund Beaufort was younger than Suffolk. This guy's got riz dripping off like his fingertips. Like, this guy is cute and funny.
Sparkle riz.
Yes. He's pro-peace with France. However, this is maybe not the best person for Margaret to make friends with because he already has a scandal tied to his name.
Oh? Spill the tea.
So Henry VI's mother was a woman named Catherine of Valois. When Henry V died, him and Catherine of Valois probably had an affair.
Oh, a scandalo.
So even though he is a good guy for her to have an alliance with because of his politics, because of his pro-peace politics, it's also tricky because his personal life is a bit messy.
to say the least. So, since Henry VI was very much interested in keeping peace with France and not continuing the war, at this point in time, Suffolk and Somerset are carrying a lot more favor at court, while York and Gloucester are getting a little bit butthurt.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than that. We could do a whole episode on just this, but let's not. And let's just get back to Margaret finally getting actually in person married to the King of England.
So she's standing there reading this letter with the squire,
quote unquote squire,
kneeling before her. We don't really know how their first on-person face-to-face meeting went, but doesn't seem like he pulled a Henry VIII, I'm gonna hold this first meeting against you thing. He's not holding this meeting like, oh, you weren't captivated by me because I'm a narcissist.
He seems to be kind of chill. According to all accounts, once she did finally learn, oh, that was the king, that's your husband, they met. We don't know if they had chemistry or anything, but from all accounts, they got along. I mean, in an arranged marriage, getting along, isn't that the best case scenario?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
So they had their official wedding a few days later, because it wasn't by proxy this time with William de la Pole. But it was a small, quiet ceremony. And now they started their journey to London. They had pageants, parades, parties, with it all coming to a head at her coronation in London. Which, oh my god, it was this whole thing.
Let's unpack it.
Let's unpack the jewels and La Guanza.
From head to toe, jewels. Imagine sparkliest lady you have ever seen.
Is it you? Is it you?
No, it's Margaret of Anjou. Which actually reminds me of, we talked about the Isabeau of Bavaria. This coronation reminded me a lot of that coronation, where it was just like so opulent, so over the top. And so she is just like head to toe, jewels. She rode into London on a barge and people threw daisies at her because the word for daisies in French, I forget what it is, but it basically translated, at least at the time, to Margaret.
Huh.
Isn't that cool?
Huh.
I know.
Marguerite. Marguerite is in French daisy.
Yes. So that's why people threw daisies at her, which I loved. So she wore a white gown, but she also wore a crown of jewels. And all of the water in the fountains in London were replaced with wine.
Can I go to there?
Invite me.
Can I go to there? Where's the cheese and the baguette? I can just go to a fountain and dip my bread in. I would love it.
Yes. And so then she gets out of the barge and she's put in a chariot. Not a carriage. A carriage is what they would have actually ridden in from day to day back then. But they made a chariot for her to be carried in. And the horses are also dressed in white with with crowns on.
Even the horses.
Even the horses are the bougiest fucking horses.
Dripping in jewels a la Guanza. So Marge is in charge on a barge, driving with some horses dressed pretty like, and it is all gorgeous as hell.
Marge and a barge in charge. So like after she got off the barge and in charge, they like did all of these pageants for her and stuff. The thing about it being like, you are bringing peace. You are the person that is going to stop my son from having to go to fight and die in this dumb war, which is so much pressure for a 15-year-old. Book that I read that said one of the pageants was like they did a Noah's Ark thing. Because isn't the whole point at the end? I'm not a biblical scholar, but at the end, God,
Katie, the biblical scholar,
not a biblical scholar. At the end, God puts up a rainbow to be like, we've made peace. Super sorry about killing everybody. Yeah, and so they did a pageant for her about Noah's Ark to be like, you're the one to end it. And so she was just like, I need to bring peace to this country. I need to stop the fighting between us. But such a lot of pressure on a 15-year-old.
But also the reference that you just made was Noah's Ark, which is 2x2. So they're expected to have babies.
Of course they are. Oh, of
You're
course.
expected to procreate. So let's tuck that in
Put
the
that in your
pages.
back pocket, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Yeah.
So the next day she was crowned at Westminster Abbey. And the coronation celebration went on for 3 more days. And now it's time to get down with the queen and shit. Down with the queen and shit.
Everyone was noticing kind of like the difference in Henry and Margaret's personalities. She is large and in charge. I wonder what his sign is. Okay, so she's an Aries. Let's see what his birthday is. Right away, they're like, "Oh, she is an opinionated bitch," and he is just happy to let her steer the ship, which I think probably suited her well. But I have to wonder if she was like a little disappointed because she had been told his dad was like this warrior king. And now he's a bit of a pushover guy. Oh, this is surprising. He's a Sagittarius.
Sag.
Oh.
Well, Sages go big or go home, and he went home.
I bet he's got some cancer in his chart or something, would be my guess. Anyway.
No thoughts, just vibes. No facts, just vibes.
So, no facts, just vibes. So anyway, it was pretty evident right away that she was much more of a commanding figure than he was.
But the two did share a passion for education, and 3 years after their marriage, Henry gave her permission to fund the opening of a college.
Oh, I love
and
that.
It just so happens to be called the Queen's College.
Of course.
And it's part of Cambridge. Can you invite me there?
No, honestly, I feel like at this point we should be honorary. Because aren't there like all kinds of celebrities that are honorary graduates of all kind of colleges? I feel like we should be honorary graduates of Queen's College at this point.
Queen's College.
Yeah. Dear Cambridge, please give us a fancy hat.
Let us in.
Yes. BT dubs, plus.
Love ya.
It's also noted that Henry and Margaret, like, they actually spent a lot of time together. And so, like we were saying earlier, that's not always a given with these arranged marriages. A lot of times in these arranged marriages, kings would marry their wives, but then just leave them to do their own thing. And then they would only really spend time together at like official events. And then when it was time to go to bed. But it seems like they actually liked hanging out with each other, which is kind of refreshing, wouldn't you say?
I know. Like, usually you don't get that.
It doesn't last long, so spoiler alert. But they liked each other.
You're just like your mother.
Me? What does that
You're
mean?
like, you tell me the ending of the story before the story even ended.
One time I watched the movie Blow with my mom. The entire time, she was just like, "Oh, that's a bad guy, spoiler alert. Oh, he dies, spoiler alert." And I was like, "Mom, that's not how spoiler alerts work. You have to say it before you spoil it." And
Mom.
Anyway. So it's nice that they liked hanging out. But were they hanging out naked? Nathan.
But are they bumping butts? Probably not.
We don't know.
Because, I mean, if history has to say we don't know, then the answer is probably no.
Maybe not.
Like, let's look at the harsh reality. Because Henry was definitely a virgin when they married.
Which is, I mean, most of the women that we talk about were virgins.
Are virgins, too. Like,
Okay, so-
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
No, that's...
It wasn't the norm for men, but also we can't. Okay, that's fine.
But he's super pious.
Yeah.
He's the king. Like, as the king, you're supposed to uphold the virtues. I got nauseous. But he wore one of those hair shirts, like You know what I'm talking about? Like, what were they?
Their shirts made of hair that were supposed to remind you of how uncomfortable it was for Christ on the cross. I have to imagine didn't necessarily turn Margaret on sexually.
Your back is really hairy and sharp. Like, yeah, not a good sign.
I'll put a link in the show notes, but there are records that support that Henry hired consultants to come into the bedroom and show them what to do.
So, not just a consultant, a sex consultant.
A sex consultant. And so they hired sex consultants, which would have been so on the DL. That would have been so controversial that the king literally did not know what to do. But
wait, that doesn't make any sense to me. Because if you raised a king to be so pious, he wouldn't want to know what that was about.
Well, yeah, that's why they had to hire the sex consultants.
And here we are.
How do you even apply for that job in the 1400s? Like, well, and also to be the sex consultant that went into the room with the king and queen, you must have, like, people must trust you.
Yeah.
You must have, like, such a good reputation. Anyway.
We gotta switch gears.
We could probably talk for the whole episode about this sex consultant. We gotta move on.
There's a little bit of a rift at court. And remember that guy, the Duke of Gloucester? That was basically the HBIC, that's head bitch in charge for you uncultured folk. He's the HBIC of Henry's government. And he had been against the alliance and her becoming queen. So Marge was kind of rude to him publicly. And it seems that as a result, Henry was taking away some of Gloucester's power bit by bit. The Duke didn't care for that all this much, so these political parties started to form to court, and it seemed that they were centered around, do we like the queen, or are we against the queen? Do we like her, or do we not like her?
He loves me.
He
loves me not.
He loves me. That's exactly what I was thinking. It's just like plucking away at the daisy.
Oh! Nathan, bring a next level into this. Everything I read said that Margaret was, like, visibly cold to the Duke of Gloucester. And I could get that. Like, if you are told this guy did not want you to be queen, of course you'd be butthurt. But maybe she shouldn't have been so publicly. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
That kind of surprises me that she did that. But again, she's 15 fucking years old. Like,
that's the other portion of this, is that she's under 21.
Maybe if she was 25 and her frontal lobe is developed.
Shit at 40, I might still say that.
Yeah. Oh, I would be a dick, but I'm also not trying to be queen. Anyway. So another piece of politics that we need to talk about is that the French came to England with this new proposition. And they're like, hey, so there is this there's this territory that is physically in France, but it's owned by England. And it's called Maine.
Not the state.
No lobsters. No. But the French are like, hey, we would like Maine back. It's here. It makes sense. Give it back. And if you give it back, we are going to do, right now in our contract, it's a 2-year truce times 10. We're going to do a 20 years truce.
Blow it up. Go for it.
Give us this land back, 20-year truce. And Henry really struggled with this. He had, like, people from all sides being like, yes, no, maybe. But Margaret was like, my entire job here is to bring peace. So sign this truce. Give them the land back, 20 years truce, double down, do it, take the fucking deal.
And the story goes that when Henry hesitated, Margaret would throw a temper tantrum or totally give Henry the silent treatment. Which, I mean, she's 15. She's a kid. And that's all she knows how to do.
I would literally rather someone punch me in the face than give me the silent treatment. I think that's really interesting, but a huge oversweeping summary of the situation is that Henry finally agreed to give France back the territory of Maine. But because he hemmed and hawed, he went back and forth, he ended up agreeing to it without the 20-year truce.
Bad move, brah.
This dude was super bad at being a king. Again, maybe you shouldn't inherit a job like that. So at the end of it, England got no money. England got no truce. France got their land. France got everything they wanted and more. And England was left with a $9 million bride that has done nothing for them.
So if you think England isn't big mad, brah, come back and listen to the rest of this episode.
This is the beginning of the unpopularity of Margaret of Anjou, which is so unfair.
It's not her fault. It's so unfair.
But we've talked about so many times on this show about how you can't talk shit on the king, so you talk shit on the queen.
No. Anne Boleyn.
Misogyny.
Misogyny is history.
Misogyny is history.
Is history. Join us on iTunes as we launch our newest.
Watch out, Sabrina Carpenter. Anyway, Nathan, let's take a break. Let's hear from these ads that hopefully don't like misogyny, and we'll come right back. And we are back. So, Nathan, hold on to your butt.
Oh, I never
you got
clenched it so tight.
You got two cheeks ready because shit is about to get dramatic.
I'm here for it.
So Maggie has been Queen of England for about 2 years. And in that time, she has already caused controversy because she is loud and outspoken and she is French.
She's from France.
She's from France, which is three things that is really unpopular in this time in England.
Another strike against her is she hasn't had any babies, y'all.
Oh my God.
And this is a big debate to this day. Did she not have any babies out of bad luck? Or is she not having babies because her husband is so pious and thinks that having sex with her is gonna damn him to all eternity? Catholic guilt.
Yes. Either way, back then, if a married woman was not getting pregnant, it didn't matter what any outside factor is. It didn't matter if your husband wasn't touching you. Publicly, you were the guilty party. Because history is, as many famous historians have said, a bag of dicks, Nathan.
I know some historians that have said that, and they're
I
very
do too. They're
regal
so
and regent
credible
and
yes.
regnant.
Everybody in the entire fucking country is looking at her being like, why haven't you had babies yet? It doesn't matter if it's because her husband can't get it up or he doesn't know how to have sex. She hasn't had babies yet, so it's her fault. And her husband is not a commanding figure as king. So she is and so she's at this point where she's also not popular. So she is in like a really like sticky situation.
And then one day she heard it through the grapevine.
Heard it through the grapevine.
That is an instant way to get Katie to jam sesh.
Would you be mine?
Jam sesh to herself. And
about to lose my mind.
honey.
Anyway.
And what? So people are saying that since the king won't touch his wife, the queen has started an affair with the Duke of Suffolk. We don't have first-hand documentation of how Maggie reacted to hearing of this rumor, but since we know she was a bit of an Aries and a hothead, we imagine she's not just gonna laugh this one off.
She's not going to be like, LOL. You know, she is going to be like, who the fuck said that? I will fight them personally. Whether the Duke of Gloucester actually started these rumors or not is irrelevant. Maggie was convinced that he, the Duke of Gloucester, who in the first place never wanted this alliance, never wanted her to be queen, started the rumor. So whether he did or not, doesn't fucking matter. In her head, she is like, this guy is out to get me, you know? So in her mind, the Duke of Gloucester's goal was to set out, tell this rumor, get the Duke of Suffolk executed, have Margaret put aside, and make the king look foolish so that he can eventually become king himself. So whether that is true or not, it doesn't actually matter. That's what was in Margaret's mind. And that is, don't you know that it's toxic?
She brought Britney Spears into this knife dancing fantasy.
It is Britney, bitch.
We don't know if it's true or not, this whole thing. But historians say not 100% true, which means lies, Manelli lies.
Yeah, historians are, I mean, we have no way of knowing. We'll never know. But yeah, historians are like, he probably... He may have started the rumor, but, like, he didn't.
The historians say Liza Minnelli.
They said Liza Minnelli, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Lies, yeah.
But from Margaret's point of view, people are coming for her. And she's like, I fight fire with fire. And long story short, Gloucester is put in prison and dies under mysterious circumstances, which means probably murdered.
Big Aries energy.
Yes. She is... established herself now as the queen of fuck around and find out, honestly.
Fafo.
Yes, sure.
So Margaret rode high off her win against her foe for a while, but it didn't last long. The Duke of York came back to take Gloucester's place as the leader of the anti-French, the AKA anti-Maggie movement, brought against charges against Maggie and her best friend at court, the Duke of Suffolk. And in a very long, drawn-out drama that we really don't have time for, the Duke of Suffolk was exiled and eventually executed. It was this whole thing, and it might be good for a Patreon episode.
I think it would be interesting. The execution of the Duke of Suffolk, I think it would be an interesting Patreon. We'll see. But either way, this is a lot of drama. It was like bam, 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 bam drama. But it had been brewing for a long time before Maggie even made her appearance in England. However, now that she's there, they have a scapegoat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They need someone to blame, and that's Margaret. And again, she still hasn't had children. If she had had children, she would have a level protection there. And I think she would love to have had children at this point, but she hasn't. She knew that was her...
That was her legacy.
I think she would have loved to have had kids at this point, yeah.
Yeah, and all this drama started to take a toll on Henry mentally. Like, I get the vibe that he would have annoyed Margaret.
But also, Margaret has lost her biggest ally at court. So on top of all of this, she is grieving the guy. She's been there for like 5 or 6 years at this point. She's grieving the loss of her best friend and probably a guy that she looked at as like a father figure at court. And so it's totally possible that she's now looking at the Duke of York being like, you did this. Who the fuck do you think you are? You know?
You're the reason my friend is gone. Like, literally.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Edmund Beaufort. The Duke of Somerset. So the Duke of Somerset steps into Maggie's new ally. It's too much. So these two grieve together. Yeah. They were like trauma bonding, which sounds nice. Also, not nice.
Because the people at court love to gossip.
Yeah, of course.
We love to gossip now. You know, when people are like, roll their eyes at gossip, I'm like, well, that's why we have history books.
Because it's all gossip.
So they're gossiping. And remember, Edmund Beaufort already had a bit of a reputation as a playboy. He maybe has already hooked up with a queen before.
Shacking up.
So people are gossiping about her and Edmund's relationship. They're doing it more quietly than the last guy because they don't want to get executed. But still, it's a bit like, oh, Oh, you saw the Queen and the Duke of Somerset are getting chummy.
It sounds interesting. Also, with the Duke of Gloucester's dead, the Duke of York is now technically next in line, and he really wants to be named heir. Margaret's like, dude, your desperation is showing. You're looking a little too needy right now.
Yeah.
You need to calm down. And we don't have time to go into it. But the whole thing, Duke of York was very much like, you need to name me heir. And Margaret is like, you need to fuck off.
The Duke of York can relate to desperation.
Yes.
Like, it's a bit much. Now, let's have a look at what's going on with Henry at the time. The King of England, Henry VI, is stressed. He doesn't like the internal fighting at his court, which is like really, like, we are skimming over quite a bit. It is getting hefty. You know, he does not like that people are talking shit on his wife. He recognizes that he hasn't gotten his wife pregnant, and I feel like he has internal guilt because he realizes it's not her fault, but she's the one that people are taking it out on. He doesn't feel empowered at the same point to do shit about fuck. He is stressed out, he's having a bad time, and he doesn't feel like he can do anything to right this ship.
But OMG, are we ready for some good news?
Yes, of course we are. Please.
So, in February of 1453, after 8 years of marriage, that's marriage for you, Margaret of Anjou is pregnant.
She's pregnant?
Yay!
Finally!
And the bells at London rang for days.
Probably.
The king is overjoyed. Margaret is overjoyed. Finally!
I'm overjoyed, honestly.
Katie's like, finally.
Finally, it has happened to me. There's a baby in my belly. But it wasn't just Margaret that's happy. Henry's happy as well. Like, oh my God, thank God. And also, they hit a pause button on the fighting within the court. Because with the announcement of the pregnancy, there just kind of becomes a little bit of a peace in the land. If the king had a son, everyone's going to quit fighting over who's going to inherit. So it's just going to make everything calm the fuck down a little bit, and that's a good thing. However,
in France, they had gotten word about a couple little squabbles or fighting that's going on in England.
Yeah.
The 2-year truce, we called it loose. It's over.
The truce is loose. There were no white Bronco. The truce is loose. So in 1453, France took over. So England had all these lands in France. France took them all back except for Calais. So one day, England had all these lands. And then the next day, France took them all and England had none of those lands except for Calais. It was a huge fucking loss, right?
Yeah, that's not a good deal.
Henry took that personally. Henry took that shit personally.
And then Henry VI learned about their defeat in August of 1453.
Yeah, and so, like, right afterwards, he suffered a mental break. Now, we're not going to go into speculation station here on what caused. Maybe on the next episode we might. But what we do know is that his grandfather, remember Isabeau of Bavaria's husband, Charles VI of France?
Yeah.
That's this guy's grandpa.
Oh, so history of mental health? Yeah.
Yeah, mental illness, like, urgh. But one day in August, Henry just goes catatonic.
I kind of wish I could just go catatonic one day and just be like, well.
Can't go to work. The lights are on, but nobody's home. Meanwhile, Nathan, Margaret is 6 or 7 months pregnant.
Can you imagine?
So now we've got these two factions of court, one of which hates her, and they are ready to fight. And her strongest ally can't do shit for her. Can you imagine how scared you'd be?
And she's big and pregnant. with a baby. Sounds like some Game of Thrones shit.
I think that's where we're going to leave her. So tune back in next time. And Nathan, cheers. Bitches.